for English.
Sure, I'll do my best.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're consulting services. We do custom software, so we sometimes are integrating with SaaS solutions, but we don't actually design SaaS solutions. We're coming in when software as a service options really aren't viable for one reason or another, and really our focus has become, and what I'm most interested in is the intersection of custom software and expertise. Right, so organizational expertise, a lot of B2B systems. There's companies have their own special approach to things, right?
Yeah,
And I think,
maybe if you would,
yeah,
Ian. People sometimes grasp complex solutions through a story. So maybe walk us through
sure,
really quickly, if you don't mind, a story. We had this customer, they're in this business. You don't need to name the name of
absolutely,
the company unless you want to. They were having this challenge. Then we did
yeah,
this, and then the outcome was that.
sure. So, kind of our recent flagship project for us was with a large electrical contractor. So they outfit data centers, very large electrical contract or large projects, data centers, automotive facilities, things of that nature. So you can imagine all the engineers and electricians running around, kind of tracking a bunch of cable and the conduit that cable goes in through all sorts of areas of that building. And these projects happen over years. So we built, like, their problem was just managing all of that structured data, right, and collaborating around it. They had many roles, and lots of detailed data that their promise to their customer was to keep track of it all and to know what's up, right, and keep the project on schedule, on track, avoid rework, all the
Yep.
common stuff. And at so the heart of it, it is giving people this, regardless of their role, this ability to know exactly where they're at, what they need to do, and give them the tools to do it. So their problem was that off the kind of the available software didn't really fit their worldview, and they'd long ago decided to build custom software back in the 90s. I think they started down that path. And it was built, I'd say, in a commodity fashion, right? It wasn't extremely thoughtful necessarily. It got the job done, but it didn't have people in mind. It had a bunch of, it was very technical, right? And things like user experience weren't on developers' minds. And still, in a lot of B2B spaces, they're still not on developers' minds, which is interesting.
So Ian, let me give you what I call an opportunity for what I call a shameless plug of Enliven. Just an absolute shameless plug. Who's your ideal customer?
Absolutely shameless. I don't know if I'm capable of shameless.
Oh, give it a normal shameless.
Well, and how direct should I go there? Because I tend to think of situations that they're in, and not really care as much about precisely who they are, but that they're in a particular situation. And that situation for me, my ideal customer is really proud of the work that they do and the approach and the worldview that they have, the processes they've developed, but the kind of internal story of delivering those services is a struggle, right? And it's a struggle because of technology. That's where I come in, and I'm the turnaround person. Where my team and I don't take all the credit, but my team and I can put folks in that situation back on track. That's our thing.
So let me see if I can just narrow the scope a little bit. So is it companies with typically less than 10 employees, less than 100, less than 1,000? Is there some sort of Scale that really fits you well?
Typically it's hundreds, just because of the level of like the level of severity in building kind of big software platforms. So we're dealing,
So you're really working with what is often referred to as mid-level companies,
yeah,
companies with
yeah,
between, say, 100 and 1,000 employees.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So tell us, because we got an audience here, we're live.
Sure.
Tell us what got you here. How'd you end up being the president of Enliven?
Yeah.
And am I pronouncing that
Yeah,
properly?
absolutely. Thanks for asking. Yeah, so Enliven just turned 10 earlier this year, much to my surprise. But my software career kind of extends back to in the early 2000s, choosing a computer science degree because I was good with computers as a hobby. And I pursued that and stuck with it, even though I wasn't excited about the idea of sitting behind a desk. I'm more of a people person. But here I was out of school, got a programming job, and took to it pretty well. Over the several years that I worked for other people, kind of these themes emerged where I realized we were able to make people's at least their work lives, which is a pretty
Mhm.
significant part of their lives.
Yep.
We were able to make pretty good improvements for people by just by putting good software, like being thoughtful about putting good software in front of them. And I was like, well, the world could take a little improvement here and there.
Okay.
And that's
So
an area that we can
I'm going to jump in
dig
there
into.
just for a second because I've got this bit of an analogy happening in my mind. um, Part of my experience has been working with companies that are, I think, in that sort of size that
Hmm.
you ideal customers for you, that they've got an absolute spaghetti mess of software.
Hmm.
Some systems talk to each other, most don't. There's no integration between the different types of software. Uh, some have legacy issues, and the fact you can't change something from 5 years ago because when you do that, the whole system falls apart. Do you guys kind of untangle the spaghetti?
Yeah. I think our favorite is when we have permission to do kind of a blank slate and just
Yeah.
start over and shed a lot of that unnecessary complexity and the baggage. But yes, we're spaghetti wranglers at heart.
Cool.
And the thing and I think this is what set me off on starting Enliven was thinking about taking the reins myself and how we can explore that further. Because when I was working for other folks, it was a little bit more siloed, right? Working at a marketing place, doing marketing stuff, which is different, right? There's still spaghetti all over the marketing world, but it doesn't get down as deeply into everyday processes that matter so much to the business.
So you're talking about things
Um,
like accounting.
yeah.
Is it also, do you also delve into the role of ERP, running manufacturing plants?
So we've integrated with some of those systems previously, but that's not an area. I think everybody's still taking off the shelf stuff typically and customizing it. At least our customers are in that world. So
So,
we're
so
it's
yeah,
more
go ahead.
project management and operations
Gotcha.
for professional services, think consulting or yeah, so accounting.
Like
uh,
one of my close friends runs a consulting company. They've got 80 consultants.
mm.
They're probably in that, sort of space, that size where it starts to make sense to have a conversation with you.
Yeah,
So how would I have them
sure can.
engage? How would I have them engage with you?
Um, yeah, I think that typically where we start conversations is, there's two sides there, but there's pain and opportunity. I don't get my phone doesn't ring typically unless somebody's in pain
Mm-hmm.
and they're experiencing issues. So a lot of times it's, hey, we're really proud of our approach. Again, like we've got we know our environment, the domain, the industry really well. We have skills, we have certifications, and we've got our own process, our own worldview around this, and we tackle big problems for our clients, and that's great. But the things are slipping, and maybe they're growing a little bit, and having trouble kind of keeping up.
So companies are in a growth cycle is a prime opportunity for them too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ian, I'm gonna digress a bit, and then we're gonna come back to this topic or a similar one. And I should have started our conversation off with this. I know from the hundreds of Live with Bottleneck that Jamie J has hosted, he typically has, in fact, I think he always has a pre-existing relationship with people he brings on to have these kind of conversations. How did you and Jamie meet?
In this case, we were connected through a third party. So I don't know Jamie.
Oh, wow.
And this would have been our kind of hello world conversation.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And who you can name the name or not name the name, who introduced you, and why did they suggest that it would be a good connection?
I think, I was just referred over to Jamie, and I'm not exactly sure what that conversation looked like, but I assume that he was interested in having a conversation about software.
Cool. Okay, so let's go down that rabbit hole, because that's a fun rabbit hole. One of my kids is a very senior software engineer and developer, so I certainly couldn't sit on a keyboard and write a line of code, but I understand just through casual conversation some of the topics that pop up. And the world of software is evolving, has been evolving for years, continues to evolves at light speed. I mean, and now, one of the next big evolutions is going to be, to some degree, blockchain. People are, rightly or wrongly, they're looking at blockchain as this new nirvana. But the topic I want to start with is the messiness of software. Like you said a minute ago, you only get called in when someone's got a problem. When they're calling you, it's a 911 call. They're not calling you to say, we should go explore some new stuff and see how it goes. They're going like, oh my God, my business is falling apart. I can't run it.
Yeah.
Accounting's not talking to marketing or sales. When you get a call, I have to think it's a 911 call.
Yeah. I think it's maybe viewed because this part of these kind of bigger companies move a little bit more slowly. So a lot of times it is kind of the spirit of it's 911, but they also recognize that it's not something that you can fix overnight, but fixing it in the next year can be kind of a 911 level, situation. I think that's generally where we start. And the idea in my mind is when we kind of maybe to avoid some of the messiness, is to take a little bit of time up front and help them reframe the situation and kind of, make a little, like step back a little bit, right? Yep. Because typically, you need to follow the pain and realize that people are making the same mistakes over and over, or we are really having trouble onboarding new employees and they're just not getting the system, or, what things are taking too long and there's a bunch of manual steps, whatever the issues are. We kind of follow those, and those are important to prioritize. But we want to step back a little bit, and we kind of have. I'm working on fleshing this idea out a little bit more, but I think there's 5 key conversations to what I would call expert software. That software, custom software that you're building to not just empower your employees and to serve your clients, but to kind of model your expert practice and evolve that over time. And that's, I think, the best expression of custom software, as for me at least, is being able to come into a business and pull out the parts that are really unique to them, get rid of all of the unnecessary complexity of other people's systems, and build stuff that's really, really fits like a glove.
Okay. So one of the questions I've got for you, Ian, is a fairly large part of the audience that watches Live with Bottleneck. They're smaller companies. They can be companies that are being building a foundation to scale. What would your advice be to someone that's got a very small company?
Yeah.
And they've got a view on growing that business.
Yeah, I'd say as far as software goes, there are some extreme scenarios where what you're doing is so novel that it just kind of dictates custom software. But by and large, smaller companies, I think, can and should either kind of do their own manual process using tools like Excel and Dropbox and just whatever else they can get their hands on, or rent it, right? Use whatever off the shelf stuff that you can and prove out the value to your clients, your customers, prove out the process and your model, your worldview. And then over time, once you have evidence that, hey, we've been able to, I keep thinking again around kind of services or consulting services that are engagement based and a little bit repetitive. It's like a practice over time for different clients. Once you have that, a good number of projects under your belt and you can see those trends across time and things that have worked well for you, and especially when you're starting to scale up your team, and you're pretty confident that this process or this practice is going to be with you for some time, that's when you should start taking it more seriously and trying to drive as much kind of efficiency and clarity as you can through the custom software process.
So what I hear you saying is sort of keep sort of poking at where the business is at, like in a good way. And as you reach a level where most businesses or many businesses will reach a point where starting to look at getting support and help from a company like yours, like Enliven, is appropriate to start looking at custom software, custom solutions. Because I just want to make sure I don't misstate this or state it incorrectly. Sounds to me like Enliven is really, really an expert around the area of custom development, custom software development. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
That's your game?
That's our game. Yeah, and pretty exclusively. And we take that seriously, and we try to we try not to do it unless it's appropriate.
Well, that's
right.
Good. So what I hear you saying is that you're not in it necessarily just for, in fact, not at all for the dollar. You really want to make sure that your customers, your clients get huge value.
Yeah, I think that's where we start our conversation, and that's the guiding kind of the guiding angle of all of our relationships there. I mean, of course, money plays into the equation there, but we need to make sure that like we're not going to feel good about it unless we're able to help, right? And not just do what a client would ask us to do without really scrutinizing it, but helping them to validate their requests and shape them and play it back to them and ask questions, so that our goal when we're designing a system, we're thinking 10 years out, right? We want to be able to build something that's useful in the first year, but that is able to be healthy at year 10, right? But it's still relevant and is adaptable and can be maintained over that course of time.
So we try and keep these interviews to about 30 minutes. Doesn't always work that way. Sometimes they go on for an hour because there's so much ground to cover. But we've got sort of 10 or 15 minutes left to have a chat here. So if I could, words of wisdom from someone that knows this world. What would your words of wisdom be to people that are watching this?
So point me in, give me a corner of the world to try to illuminate, and I'll do my best. But
Somebody sitting there with a company that's got 75 or 200 employees. I think you've already said a lot of it, but I want to give you a chance to just make it
sure.
crystal clear. What would you be opening that conversation with?
Yeah. I think, well, and I guess I'd like to think about, for like my advice and words of wisdom here are, and I'll anchor this still to the custom software world. So when they're thinking about designing, or taking out a vendor to build some custom software, do it in house themselves, there's really a few things that you want to do first, or at the beginning, and one of them is really step back and kind of think about your identity, your as an organization, your mission, your vision. Like, who are we? What are we trying to do here? And what is our best self?
In all
Yeah.
my years of having many conversations with many people in the realm of software development, I've never heard someone make that statement.
Well,
It's all about the functionality and the bells and whistles and all that stuff. You're not talking about that stuff at all.
What does that stuff serve? Like, that's more interesting to me. And it's what allows software to actually be like meaningful, like I said, in that first year, and still relevant 10 years on. It's because you're anchoring it deeply to, let's just take the example, another world that I've operated in is kind of healthcare auditing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're looking at healthcare data, patient claims data, pharmacy prescriptions, doing regulatory compliance, things of that nature. And it's like, well, what is our goal here? It's like, we're trying to improve this little corner of the world. We're trying to be the experts at, familiarity with the regulations, and just be kind of the stewards of this kind of cleanup, and helping people be more comfortable. And like, then we say, okay, well, what's at stake? So now we know who we are.
Yep.
But what's at stake if we don't do anything, right? And if we kind of just keep on like we're keeping on today, what does that look like? How does this pain of people making mistakes or inefficiencies, or it's hard to onboard people, like, how does that, because invariably it's going to erode their identity and their mission and their vision and their culture. They're going to lose a bit of that. So we want to be grounded in that risk, and then be specific about the outcomes. So what do we want to do? So what do we need to do to prevent that? And to retain this kind of positive vision that every organization of that kind of size has. I think even small companies have it, even if it's not written down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you are really specific about outcomes. So I like to think of it as this, the company will have these sorts of outcomes in terms of client reputation or client perception, and these sorts of outcomes in terms of employee perception. So here's how our employees are going to feel and look at us once we fix these things, and how it's going to feel to work inside of this organization once we fix these problems. And
So I'm
I'm
gonna see if I can extract one particular story out of you. So using only the person's first name, unless it's comfortable to use their full name and their company. Tell me a story you've had after you've worked with an organization, a conversation where they were grateful for the work that you've done, the positivity you've added, for the change in their lives that's so much better. And I'd like to make it really personal. That's why I'm asking you to use, like reach in and grab a name of someone where you've had that conversation 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the road.
Yeah. I might, I'll just call this person Jim.
Sure.
But we did some work. It's actually been about 10 years now. It's one of our earlier projects that, he was leading the CIO of the organization, a few hundred people.
And for those people that don't know what that acronym means,
Chief Information Officer.
Great, thank
So
you.
not just looking at technology, but what you're getting out of technology.
Yep. It's a much broader role.
Yeah, and he had a project that was midstream, and he brought us in to save it, and really it was a functionality.
So did you guys come riding in on your white horses? And
oh no,
nothing that
we
dramatic.
We were
Nothing
pretty
that
excited.
dramatic?
we were pretty excited, but yeah, it probably wasn't that dramatic. So the dilemma there was he had a team that was working on it that built all the functionality, and nobody was going to he realized when it was 70% done that nobody's going to be able to use this thing. And it was kind of his baby. He's really proud of what the potential there, or really excited about the potential there. And we were able to, I'd say, kind of rescue that and make it a very usable application. And over time, it became just something that they relied on and were proud of, to the point where people that worked for their competitors would come, take a job with them and be like, wow, I could never go back to using what the rest of the industry uses to do this kind of work. And that eventually turned into something that they started selling as a product to other companies as well. So so I still hear from them, and I need to connect with them now. But that level of, the attention to detail that we were able to provide, and just trying to solve the right problem at the right level, right? We're not overcomplicating things, but we just want to make software that embraces the real complexity and kind of keeps away the unnecessary complexity. And that made a huge difference to him. And, we've done a lot of projects since then. And that's kind of how I know how big of a difference that made.
I get you. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Before we wrap up here, Ian, how do people reach you?
Sure.
We're having some technical problems here, so if you can just say your email address, it'd be great.
Sure.
Oh, hang on. We may have help here. So there's your website that just popped up.
Yep, that's right. It's enlivenhq.com, and that's the best place to find us.
Super. Let's see if your email pops up. Look at this. Somebody's watching.
Bam,
My producer's watching and doing a great job. So everybody that's watching, you can reach Ian at irobinson@enlivenhq.com.
That's it.
Ian's been a guest on Live with Bottleneck. And any parting words, Ian, before we wrap up here?
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation. Good questions.
Same here. Love what you're doing. You're making people's lives better. And just
in a small way.
No, I don't think it's such a small way. And I can tag into that a shameless plug for Bottleneck. Bottleneck has a similar or the same mission. Mm-hmm. It's to give people the tools so they've got systems and processes and people. We supplied what we call distant assistants or virtual assistants to companies, where we actually start there, and then we actually build systems and processes for them to make their lives better. And so that they can delegate tasks on a regular basis to more people and free themselves up to do their best work. And I think that's a big part of what you do as well.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I'm going to, since I don't have the control board in, I'm going to ask the producer if she'll wrap us up here. Let's see what happens.
Thanks.